Welcome back in, everybody, to another episode of the Stadium Seat Sports Podcast. As always, I'm Coop here with my partner and co-host Kriv. And this week, we're going to be taking a look at four different games for the Week 7 slate. And the game we're going to be starting off with here is the headliner, not only this week, but potentially one of the best, if not could end up being the best game in college football this regular season. And that's going to be number 2 Ohio State traveling to Eugene to take on number 3 Oregon. So, Kriv, if you want to kick this one off here, really excited to hear your thoughts and chat about this game.
Yeah, I think this is one of those games that has been circled since before the season even started. I mean, for one, outside of the Rose Bowl or national championship, I mean, it's not every day you get to see Ohio State and Oregon go head to head. And we get to see that here, and it's a 2-3 matchup. And honestly, this could be the first of 2 matchups, 3 matchups. Who knows? With the new playoff format and both of these teams being in the Big Ten.
Yep.
So for me, it's a couple of things that stand out though, and that's which Oregon defense is going to show up, because we saw early in the year them get absolutely manhandled to a certain extent, especially against Boise State. Now, obviously, we now know. Genty is a Heisman favorite. He's ripping teams apart left and right. He's definitely the best running back in college. But all things being said, I mean, Judkins and Henderson are not far off, if not right on par with him. They don't have to be the feature guy like he does. So,
sure.
If Oregon can't stop the run like they couldn't early in the year, it's only a -3 spread, but I think it could get ugly real quick for Oregon. On the other hand, I really do think that Ohio State's defense with Tyleik Williams in the center is a different defense than without. And we've seen he's played 2 games, he's missed 2 games or 3 games, I think. Their defense looked significantly different, and you saw it last week against Iowa. They shut down the run completely outside of one long touchdown run with the backups in. He's a game changer. And I think that's going to cause a lot of problems for Dylan Gabriel and James in the backfield there, even though he's a really good running back, over 6 yards per carry. But, man, I just think Ohio State, for whatever reason, they're going to go in there and they're going to want to have a statement win. And I see them pulling it out, and it's -3. I think they cover that easily. Just based on what we've seen earlier in the year, I think they're going to surprise some people and put the college football on notice.
Yeah, and I think you talked on a lot of great points, in covering this game from your viewpoint. And to me, and I think probably in a lot of college football fans' minds, at least up to this point in the season, there might not be one elite team in college football yet. And I think both teams in this game have the opportunity to present themselves as that elite team in college football, where you're like, that team is just a tier above all of the other teams in college football at this moment. And I think that one of the biggest storylines of this game, I think, is going to be Ohio State's offensive line against Oregon's defensive line, because I think Oregon's defensive line is pretty stout. I think that they have the ability to really manhandle teams at the line of scrimmage. Now, granted, they need to play their best game. And going into the year, one of the biggest concerns with many people for Ohio State was that offensive line. And I think Ohio State's offensive line has surpassed what a lot of people thought that they were capable of being. So I think that that's going to be a very big thing, because we have kind of both touched on this. I think that Will Howard is a serviceable quarterback, that he doesn't need to be like a Cam Newton, even a CJ Stroud for Ohio State. Like, he needs to manage the offense, limit his mistakes, and march this team down the field. And I think it's going to be crucial for Ohio State to get TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins going, as if they haven't been going the entire year. But I think in this game, if Ohio State can establish the run with those 2 backs, and I think that's exactly what Ryan Day and Chip Kelly are going to try to do, it will open up the field for Will Howard and for this Ohio State offense. And I think that they're going to really, really be cooking. So I fully expect Ohio State to lean heavily on the run to really try and establish that, because Eugene, really tough place to play. Autzen Stadium is going to be absolutely rocking Saturday night. The biggest way to quiet down a crowd is to go on a long, sustained drive, hitting some big runs, and getting in the end zone. And that's fully what I expect Ohio State to do. And I looked at some of Ohio State's press conferences from this week, and Ryan Day is saying that these players, this coaching staff, this program is super amped for this game. They're preparing harder than they've prepared for any other game so far this year. And you can just feel that kind of grit and toughness in the air. And you'll love to hear that, because I hope we get just a fantastic game here. And from the other side, like Dillon Gabriel in Oregon, you mentioned it. They've had some difficulties so far this year against Boise State, Idaho State. Like, they've not looked like the team we expected them to look like in the beginning of the year, but they've been getting better week by week by week in my mind, especially that offensive line. And so I think that Oregon, is going to be obviously Ohio State's stiffest test up to this point. And I think they're going to give Ohio State a really, really good game. And what I'm going to be interested in is Oregon's red zone offense versus Ohio State's red zone defense, because I think Ohio State's red zone defense has been great this year. They haven't let many people in the red zone, to be honest with you. But I think I think Oregon's going to move the ball is my main point. I think Oregon's going to get down into the red zone on several different occasions, and we're going to see how Ohio State handles them inside the red zone. Because if they can force Oregon into kicking field goals in a majority of those red zone trips, Ohio State puts themselves in a very good position. And at the same point in time, Ohio State's been incredibly efficient. They've been the number one most efficient team in the red zone in college football this year. So Ohio State's offense in the red zone against Oregon's defense, I think that's going to be one of the keys to the game as well, just like that defensive line for Oregon versus Ohio State's offensive line, and Ohio State getting the run game going. So I'm in agreement with you. I think Ohio State wins this game. I feel better about them going into this game. I think that they're so talented and deep overall that they do not need to rely upon one person. And if Oregon's like, hey, we're going to take away Jeremiah Smith, well, okay, we got Emeka Egbuka, we've got Travion Henderson, we have Quinshon Judkins. They just have so many weapons that it's going to be very hard for Oregon to dial up a defense and offensive game plan to get out of this with a win. I think it's a close game. I would take Ohio State -3. I think I would take Ohio State closer to like a 7 to 10 point win. But we're in agreement on this first game. We're both rolling with Ohio State. So we'll see what happens come Saturday night. But we're either going to both look very smart or not.
Yeah, I'd say so. And of course, I mean, another potentially fun game and longtime rivals. And I'm going to call this the Red River Shootout. I don't care that they renamed it. Yeah. But that's Texas against Oklahoma. I mean, 1 versus 18. I'll let you kick things off here, but I think this is potentially an interesting one.
Yeah, it feels really weird for it to not be called the Red River Rivalry. And I'm in full agreement with Shootout, excuse me, not the Red River Rivalry. Yep, Shootout, excuse me. And it feels weird that it's not Texas versus Oklahoma in a Big 12 showdown, but rather an SEC showdown. That also feels weird to say. But, this one, to me, the spread as we're talking about it is 14.5 in favor of Texas. I mean, that is a massive spread against your biggest rival. Like, that to me is just, I get it, because Oklahoma's offense has just been so anemic this year especially, and Texas is getting Quinn Ewers back in this game. So I am definitely leaning Texas in this game to win, but that 14.5 spread to me is a little bit much in my mind. I would lay the points with Oklahoma, but take Texas in the game to win, and I think Texas wins fairly comfortably. But 2+ touchdowns in a rivalry game is just a lot for me. I mean, with Oklahoma, I mentioned it here, they just can't get anything going offensively. They're going to be without their number one wide receiver, which obviously hurts an already depleted offensive, product that Oklahoma puts on the field. Like, their defense, I think, is going to give Texas some fits. Their defense is solid, which is what you would expect under, a Venables' run program. But I think Texas is just going to be too much. I think Texas, especially with getting Ewers back, that offensive line, I think that they're going to be able to just manhandle Oklahoma up front. Maybe not initially. Like I said, I do think Oklahoma is going to put up a fight, but I do think that Texas is just going to wear on them throughout the game, and it's just going to lead them to what will be a relatively comfortable victory. In Oklahoma, like Jackson Arnold, you know, he's just not been anything spectacular this year.
He's not starting anymore.
He's not starting. Okay.
No, Michael Hawkins Jr. had his first start, I think, last week or the week before.
Okay. Either way, I'm not thrilled with either one of those quarterbacks. Like when Oklahoma has won this game, like last year, who is their quarterback? Dillon Gabriel. And I'm not like, sitting here telling you Dillon Gabriel is going to be a high NFL draft pick, but like Dillon Gabriel is an absolute difference maker, especially at the collegiate level.
Yes.
Oklahoma doesn't have that on offense. And especially at the most important position in a quarterback. And so that to me is just what gives me so much pause on Oklahoma. I really like their defense. I think they're physical. I think they're very talented. And I think they're going to give Texas fits in a lot of ways. I have such little belief in their offense that I think if Texas truthfully were to score 21 points in this game, I think it's game over. And that sounds like what you were talking about with Ohio State and Iowa last week, where it's like, well, Ohio State's got 7 points at halftime. Game over because it's Iowa. It sounds insane to be saying that about like Texas and Oklahoma because we're used to just high scoring outputs. But like I that's truly how I feel. I think if Texas gets like 17 to 21 points, the game's over. And they're gonna come out victorious. So that's the way I see it. And I would be interested to hear, if you're leaning the same way and if you're gonna lay the points on Texas.
Yeah, like you said, I think 14.5 is a lot because that's more than 2 touchdowns to win in a rivalry game. That doesn't happen very frequently. Obviously, Texas beat Oklahoma, I think maybe 2 years ago, 49-0 or whatever that was, like out of nowhere. But then, of course, Oklahoma won last year, I think 34-30, something like that. Another close, crazy rivalry game. And I honestly think those last 2 games are exactly what's going to happen tomorrow. It's either going to be Saturday, but it's either going to be Texas in a blowout or Oklahoma in a stunner. And 2 things stand out to me. One, Michael Hawkins Jr. Being quarterback, very dynamic with his legs. We've seen quarterbacks make plays with their legs in games where upsets have happened, and that seems to be a consistent theme a lot of the time when big powerhouse teams lose. You just lose to a guy that you can't script what's going to happen with legs, just scrambling around everywhere. The other thing to me that could potentially open the door just a tiny bit for Oklahoma is Jadon Blue. Obviously, last week he had 2 fumbles against Mississippi State. If he does that again in a rivalry game, those are huge momentum shifts depending on when those fumbles happen. So he has to be on top of things, and if he's not, it could open the door. But yes, I think Texas is likely going to be the one to pull this out, and maybe not by that 14.5 cover, but they should take care of business. Yeah,
no, I obviously agree with you. That was my take as well on this game. And I'm going to let you go first rather on this next game. And that's going to be number 18 KSU taking on the Colorado team here that's, I really haven't paid much attention to them this year, and they're quietly sitting there at 4-1. I mean, I kind of stopped watching them after that Nebraska loss, and here they are sitting at 4-1. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this game, and then I'll give you my take.
Yeah. So really, I think that Colorado has definitely upped their game recently. I believe that when they played USF the other week, they were actually underdogs, and they completely destroyed them. Sanders is looking really good per usual. I mean, Travis Hunter, he might not be the Heisman favorite, but it's between him and Genti right now. And he is he's a game changer on both sides. He gives them a chance to win just by sheer willpower. But for me, I just feel like Kansas State's a more complete team. We know Colorado's had their issues on the offensive line and in the trenches in general, and that defense can have a few weak points here and there. And I think that's where Avery Johnson, and especially this run game that Kansas State has between Giddens and also Avery Johnson using his legs, I think they're going to pull it out. I think this game has like fun written all over it. It has just explosive players, guys who are willing to use their legs to make plays. Travis Hunter, who's just a rock star out there. But yeah, I think Kansas State pulls it out in a shootout.
Yeah, this game is just really, really difficult for me to predict here because I really, we'll be honest, like I said, kind of introducing this game, I've not watched a lot of Colorado this year. I watched that Nebraska game where they looked, really quite bad, especially the offensive line. And then we talked about, Shedeur calling out his offensive line publicly, and we talked all about that. And I think the world of Shedeur Sanders. I think he's a fantastic collegiate quarterback. Hunter is probably the leader for the Heisman, and if he's not, he should be right up there. He's an absolutely amazing two-way player. And I think, Avery Johnson for Kansas State is great in his own, in his own right. He's having some of the struggles with some turnovers that you would expect a young collegiate quarterback to have. But I think overall, Kansas State to me has just a slightly more talented, better team than Colorado has. And while I think the world of Hunter and Sanders, I'm also going to take Kansas State close in this game. I do think it's not a blowout in either direction. I think it's a highly competitive game. I would not be surprised to see Colorado come out with the win. But I just believe in Kansas State's roster a little bit more. And so I'm going to take them in a close victory. And I don't want to, dabble on too long in this one because I think you hit on pretty much all the points I was going to touch on. So that's my pick for this one. And then the last game we're going to go into here, and this is, we're not calling it our upset of the week. What we're calling it here is kind of our underdog of the week. And, that game is going to be Ole Miss taking on LSU. And so, this one to me is really interesting because Ole Miss had a good bounce back last week after suffering a loss at the hands of Kentucky. And so they're sitting there at 5-1. And LSU's sitting there quietly at 4-1 because I feel like LSU we've not really touched on much, and I haven't really seen them get a lot of national notoriety after suffering that pretty handled beatdown at the hands of USC to start the year in Vegas, and there they are quietly sitting at 4-1. So this one to me is really going to be all about the quarterbacks. I think Jackson Dart for Ole Miss is a really, really good quarterback. I mean, he's got over 2,000 yards already in this season, and we're going into week 7 here. He's got 2,100 yards on the year. And then you got another guy in Nussmeier on the other side with LSU, who's not that far behind him. He's got a little over 1,600 yards this year. Both have put up 13 touchdowns for Dart, 15 for Nussmeier, and Nussmeier's got a couple more interceptions than Dart. So I think, to me, it's really going to come down to the quarterback play here, because I think overall these two teams and two programs are in relatively similar places. And it's interesting to me because Lane Kiffin, I think, can be a fantastic coach at times. I think the same thing about Brian Kelly, but the same thing that plagues both coaches in my mind is that I don't always trust them in big time games, in big time moments. And here they are going against each other. And I don't know which one I trust more, to be honest with you, because I have the same hesitations and fears with both of them. And so I'm going to go down in this game. Really, it's going to be which quarterback I believe in more. And to me, that's Garrett Nussmeier. I believe in him just slightly more than I believe in Jackson Dart. And I think the world of both of them, but Nussmeier to me just seems a little bit more poised in the pocket when, maybe the pocket's breaking down. If he's in, a tight, intense moment in a game like this, I've seen Nussmeier, at times be able to kind of, if not shrug off that pressure, be able to handle it in a good, mature way that you would want to see from your quarterback if, it comes down to a single drive or, a needed third down conversion or what have you. And I think sometimes, Dart can almost get in his own head. And maybe that's in part due to Lane Kiffin and some of his scramble brain plays that seem to come about in these big time moments. So for me, it really came down to the quarterbacks in this game, and I trust Nussmeier ever so slightly more. So I'm going to take LSU to pull off the little mini upset here, because I mean they're still ranked number 13, taking on number 9, so it's not going to be any kind of massive upset. But that's the way I'm leaning right now, and I'm excited to see if you feel differently.
Yeah, I think you hit a lot of good points there. And for me, the fact, like all things being equal, I think Ole Miss is probably a better team overall. But the one big equalizer and the thing that I think will shift this into LSU's favor is Baton Rouge in Tiger Stadium. I mean, that is one of the hardest places to play a game, and they have a night game. I mean, that throw the records out the window. I know they are LSU's 4-1, Ole Miss is 5-1. Like going in there is something different. I think Urban Meyer literally said the other day that's the hardest place he ever had to go and bring his Florida teams into. That stadium, those fans, the way the players elevate their game playing in front of them. I mean, that is something that can't be quantified. And I think you mentioned it before, but it feels like Nussmeier's had, even in short spurts, he's had his moments in big moments, pressure cooker situations where he's come through. And we've seen Dart kind of lay an egg every now and then. We saw it against Kentucky a few weeks ago. Obviously, they bounced back and they beat South Carolina pretty good, but we saw it against Kentucky that it can happen. And I think for whatever reason, when you get to that Tiger Stadium, that's going to throw them off their game, keep things close, and I think Nussmeier's going to come through in the end.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, you hit on it. Like, I think that Tiger Stadium, LSU, is the hardest place in college football to play. I really do. I think there's some incredible environments. Autzen Stadium, I mentioned. I think, Penn State Stadium and the whiteout is incredible, but I think Tiger Stadium is just different. And I think that that's a fantastic point that I didn't touch on that you hit on. So great point. And guys, as always, really appreciate you listening. Like, subscribe, leave your comments down below, and let's have another fantastic weekend of college football, and we'll see you guys on the next one.